My guest this week is EVAN Funk Davies. Evan has been a DJ on listener-supported freeform radio WFMU in Jersey City, New Jersey since 2004. He was also the original DJ on WNYU's groundbreaking New Afternoon show in the early 1980s, one of the first shows to exclusively feature current punk, post-punk, and new wave music. But Evan is also a drummer with the DB's adjacent New York female-fronted new wave band, the Cosmopolitans, in 1980. And perhaps most relevant to today's discussion, for the first few years of the millennium, he pretended to be Phil Rudd in an AC/DC cover band, not a tribute band, called The Dirt Cheap. You can tune into Evan's WFMU show on Wednesdays from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, where he mostly plays lesser-known catchy rockish records and features live in-studio performances and interviews. He will always be my pick to click. So it gives me a great pleasure to welcome to Revolutions Per Movie, Evan Funk Davies. Hi, Evan.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
I'm great. I love your eastern sun right now. I can see it.
And I even have the blind closed.
Yeah, no, it's good. Okay. I'm just going to say it. We're going to talk about Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg. I'm going to put it out there right now, and we will get into your AC/DC cover band life. But as a kid here in Portland, a record store clerk would give me his New York rockers when he was done with them. And I'd look at them and I'd fantasize about these places that I'd read about, like Danceteria and Club 57 and the Mud Club and Peppermint Lounge. And you are getting to run wild in this. I mean, what did that feel like? I'm so jealous still of that time.
Well, I can probably temper your jealousy a little bit. Because I was, at least in theory, also going to college at the same time.
Uh-huh.
So I wasn't out. I just was talking to someone about this the other day. I wasn't out as much as, in hindsight, I wish I had been, even though I did get to see a lot. I actually never even made it to like the Mud Club or the old, the original, tiny Club 57. I was in New York. I got to NYU in the fall of 78. And I've lived in the New York City area ever since, but I was in NYU housing and then still going to NYU from 78 through 82. So, I mean, the places I would go to most often were probably Hurrah, which was a great rock club on the Upper West Side up by Lincoln Center.
Right.
And, I saw Iggy Pop there. I saw Joe Jackson there. I saw Bram Tchaikovsky there. Just, tons and tons of amazing bands. And I actually, the funny thing is, while I was at NYU, I never even went to CBGB because it was all the way over on the scary Bowery. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to go to that neighborhood. Because, I was like a suburban Boston kid and, was not fully comfortable yet with the more inner city areas.
It took me decades to get to New York. I was scared shitless to go to New York for my first time. I was like, don't look people in the eyes. Walk this way.
Right.
Just push through people. And I was like, what is your fucking problem? But yeah, I was really, the myth of it was huge because I'm watching Downtown 81 or, Smithereens and being like, I'm not built for this.
Right. I also saw some larger shows at the Palladium, which was on 14th Street, so just a few blocks north of the NYU campus. I remember seeing The Clash there and Gary Newman. But the thing is, and, I have friends on Facebook, and I'm sure you do too, if not some of the same friends, who from time to time will find these old Max's Kansas City ads or,
Yes.
Hurrah ads or all these other New York City club ads and post them. And it's just this ridiculous array of bands that, are still in the forefront of your mind. And yet they're just kind of coming through New York. It's just a regular week. It wasn't a special festival or anything like that.
No, it'll be the Slits, Lounge Lizards, John Sex. And then it'll be REM with Gang of Four.
Right.
And you're like,
right, yeah.
1980? What?
Uh-huh. Yeah, U2 at the Ritz, 1982, I think it was.
It's wild.
But you don't really know when you're, 19, 20 years old and living in that environment that it's not always like that. You can't really recognize, I don't think,
Absolutely.
that this isn't the way it always is.
Yes.
And it's really only after you've put some distance between that period and your current life, and also you've kind of looked around and you're saying to yourself, wait, what happened to all these great bands that I used to be able to go see every week? The bands that are around now maybe aren't so great.
Yeah.
Or you're just not finding them as easily, which is more likely the case. So and it's just so, I mean, it was terrific. And it was amazing to have that opportunity to see all those bands. But at the time, it didn't strike me as like an amazing moment in time. It wasn't really until I got older and looked back that I saw it as that incredible, fertile, prolific environment for music that it was.
Right. Well, I have two questions related to that. Who did you see the most? And also, who were you like, oh, shit, they're on the bill again? Like somebody who overplayed way too much. Because there's always those bands, too.
Yeah, there are. That's funny. I mean, I have to say, I can't think of an answer to the second question right off the top of my head. I don't feel like there was anyone... I really can't remember anyone looking at the bill and thinking, oh, man, I'll just get there late that night because I've seen them so many times.
Oh, you're too kind.
I think that... maybe I am. I think the bands I saw the most were the DBs and this other New York band called Nervous Rex, Nervusrex, that were like also kind of a similar poppy band. They had keyboards. They ended up recording an album with Mike Chapman out in LA. And as I mentioned on my show more than once, when they got back to New York after recording that album, in my view, they were not the same. I don't know what Mike Chapman did, but I always felt like he took the, I mean, he was great with Blondie and dozens of other bands, but for some reason it just seemed like he sucked the energy out of Nervous Rex. But I saw them a lot. But very fortunate to see the DBs very often because they were always playing, whether it was like Hurrah, Tier 3, which is an amazing club downtown. Just so many little places around Manhattan that I would get to go see them. And I used to go stalk Peter Holzapfel when he was working at a record store on 3rd Avenue on like 23rd Street called Musical Maze. And he was he's very friendly, and we're still friendly with each other to this day. So props to him for not thinking I was a jerk for barging in on him at work from time to time.
You've had a decade-spanning career supporting independent music before it was called independent music.
I think we just called it music.
Right. Exactly. It's so funny. But like, do you remember the first time you got to DJ?
So at NYU, it was definitely, well, I guess I should back up a little bit. At my high school outside of Boston, Lincoln Sudbury Regional High School, on the off chance anyone is listening who knows where that is. We had a little like closed circuit radio station that broadcast into the cafeteria from like a little cubby in our like AV area. So I used to, that was probably the first time I was DJing for more than myself, like more than like doing radio shows on cassettes in my house, like that no one ever listened to. And that was I think I have to say that, this was like probably 76, 77. So it was still mainly influenced more by top 40, I would guess. And like I was mainly listening to like top 40 as opposed to album rock for most of my high school years. But like some of the album stuff worked its way in, and some of the punkier stuff worked its way in as some friends of mine started turning me on to that. But then I got to NYU. I got involved with the radio station there. And before I got on the FM station, they only broadcast on FM from 4 in the afternoon until 2 in the morning because they time shared with another school in the area.
Okay.
So there wasn't that much airtime available on the FM station, but they did have an AM only broadcast that just went into the dorms, which also carried the FM simulcast because the transmitter was up in the Bronx where NYU used to have a campus, and you couldn't actually pick up the FM on the NYU campus in Greenwich Village. So they set up this like online carrier current station, and then when the FM wasn't on the air, like new or aspiring DJs could go on and do shows on the AM. And so my initial shows on the AM were just kind of this mix, I think, of sort of like, new wave, whatever it was at the station, and some of the, records I had brought from home. And then once I got on the FM, that was actually much more formatted, ironically, because we kind of, and when I say we, I was kind of going along, but I wasn't really setting this policy, but I was very happy to go along. We kind of took over the new music afternoon show. It wasn't even, I guess it was, the music-based afternoon show was on from 4 until 7, and it was just called the afternoon show. And so we took it over and called it the new afternoon show, and put in place these rules that were primarily designed to make it more interesting to listen to and make the music more compelling. But secondarily, were also designed to get rid of the old guard who had been doing shows on the station for a little while and were more aspiring to emulate like the local album rock station, and they would play like hour-long sets, and they would come on and be like, yeah, we just heard the Doors, and that kind of thing. So Sal, the program director, instituted this policy where you could play no more than 2 songs in a row. Then you had to come on and announce what the songs were. So it really was kind of a top 40 presentation, which worked great because the music was so energetic and so upbeat that it really was kind of a natural fit. So that was, that's when I started doing the FM broadcasts, and that was probably 1980 or so. And that was much more, I did bring some records of my own, but there was also like a metal cabinet that had all of the kind of approved or cleared records for the afternoon show. And most of your show had to be taken from the records in that cabinet, which was no problem for me because I liked, most of what was in there. But again, eventually the people who had been doing the old afternoon show started breaking format enough that they just got kicked off.
Well, how long does it take you to put together your current show? You'll be like, sometimes it's thematic, and it's always fun to like read the live notes as you're broadcasting and people like flipping out or chiming in and stuff. But I mean, like, do you switch? Well, there's a lot of questions at once. I mean, do you switch things at the last minute, like pull it off the turntable and be like, no, this one's right? Like how do you determine your flow?
So it's really, unless it's a show where, for example, I've interviewed someone, let's say I've interviewed an author who wrote a book, and in the course of the interview or in the course of reading the book, I've come up with a bunch of music that I want to share in the course of that interview just to break up the conversation. In those cases, I usually have everything kind of planned out ahead of time, and I'll even make up a spreadsheet with the timings just to make sure I don't find myself stuck and like running out of time when there's something I really wanted to get to. But that's really the exception. 90% of the shows, I get to the station and I really don't know yet what I'm going to play during the show. And obviously before the show starts, I'll pick something out, and maybe I always bring a whole lot of records with me from home. I have a bunch of digital files that I have on my own that I've either received from bands or labels or that I've bought from Bandcamp. And then I also use Tidal to just access like newer releases that I don't have, that I haven't received myself or that the station hasn't received. So I have these little buckets of music, and then the station itself obviously has a big, pile of new records and new CDs that I try to go through for an hour or two before my show when I get there every week. But once the show starts, it's like I kind of pick out the first song, and everything else just sort of happens in the moment. It's not, it's not at all planned out, for better or worse.
No, I get it.
And there have absolutely been times when I've had a record queued up and ready to go, and then when there's like 20 seconds left on the record that's on the air, I'm like, no, I want to do something else, and I like scramble to like queue something else up, and usually make it on time, but not always. But yeah, that to me is the way. That's just the way I like to do it. There are people at WFMU, and I'm sure who do radio elsewhere, who do things much more planned out. There used to be someone who came on after me. This is probably like 15 or so years ago now. But she came in and she had her whole show in an iTunes playlist, and she just started the playlist and just went through the whole show, and that was the show. There was no, obviously she put time in to preparing that list before the show, but once it started, that was the show. There was no kind of deviation from that. And that's just, for me personally, that's just not the way that I like to do my show.
Sure.
But, people do whatever works for them. So, no judgment.
What's the backing track you have when you're speaking?
It's a loop of a song called Saturday Night by the Lords of Brooklyn, Lords with a Z, which is this kind of rock hip hop track that came out in the early 90s. And it prominently samples part of the guitar solo or the guitar riff from American Woman by the Guess Who, which kind of works actually on a couple of levels. Not that I really planned it out that way. Initially, I just put it in. I started using it as my bed because I like the song a lot. And it's kind of not unlike Rockstar now that I think about it. It's kind of a dumb song, but in a fun way. And if you ever have a chance to watch the video, which you can find on YouTube for this song by the Lords of Brooklyn, I encourage you to do so. And once a year during our fundraising marathon, I play the full song so that people can hear like the rap vocals by this Bushwick or Bay Ridge or wherever they're from, Bensonhurst, I think, band like white boy rap going on. And it's just, it's awesome, but it's also dumb. And those two qualities just kind of work well together in some situations. But it also works out well because I play a lot of Canadian bands on my show, as it turns out. And of course, the Guess Who are Canadian. So it's kind of a little subtle CanCon undercurrent
Yeah, no.
going on even during the mic breaks.
I tell you, the best at Guess Who, you can't go wrong. I reached
No,
for that.
no,
for a
you
lot.
really can't.
And that there's
Yeah.
there's some songs on there. I'm like, I think Bob Mould stole this riff for Sugar. You know, like
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and then that song Bus Rider. Oh my God, what a
I don't remember
weird
that
song.
one. Not again.
Yeah, it's wild. Has there ever been a good movie made about DJing?
That's a good question. I wish if I could do a call a friend right now, I would call Scott Williams, a fellow WFMU DJ, because just a few weeks ago on his show, he was talking about movies that have like they're kind of centered around radio DJing, and he mentioned one that's escaping my mind right now that he said was like a prime example. But the one I think that he kind of got him on the topic was the movie FM, which I kind of have a soft spot for because I saw it in high school. It was like kind of a semi-date at the time. So, and I was like, I went through my whole, pretty much from like, 8 or 9 years old until, several years after college, wanting to be a DJ and planning to be like, to make that my for money career, which didn't pan out. So it was exciting to me to see a movie that was like based on, radio and DJing and everything like that. So, I mean, I would kind of put FM up there, even though it's like one trope after another. And maybe if I hadn't chosen Rockstar, I might have chosen FM for us to talk about.
Unlike Rockstar, which is trope free. This film. Okay.
Oh my God.
The hundreds of thousands of songs you've played over the air, just that people haven't heard of, and getting people up to speed on certain, artists and just introducing stuff. I love that this film is what you picked. 2001 film, directed by Stephen Herrick, who did Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure,
Right.
Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, The Mighty Ducks, and Mr. Holland's Opus, right? So obviously he loves music.
Yes, right. That all sounds about right.
So did you see the film when it came out?
I don't remember seeing it in a theater, but I feel like I heard about it. And I must have seen it not long after. I have it's not right here, but I have a DVD of it actually, which I may have gotten.
Oh, I do too.
I think I might have I think I might have just found it in a store, like for $2 or something.
Yeah.
But I was interested in it, when it came out, A, because of like the Ripper Owens connection, which we can talk about in a minute. And B, because like every other white male of a certain age, I was a huge fan of The Wire TV show. And when I saw that Dominic West, one of the lead actors on The Wire, was in this movie, I was like, oh, that should be fun. And the first time he came on screen in this movie, I was like, oh my God, like I could not believe that it was the same actor.
It's so weird. The film has some great actors in it. I mean, it has Timothy Spall, who's in all the Mike Lee films and, seasons of Fargo. And it's a weird film. I saw this opening day with John Moen, who's in Eyelids with me, and he's also in The Decemberists and played with Stephen Malcolmus and stuff. But we were just like, wow, Mark Wahlberg in like a Ripper Owens biopic kind of thing. Like, and we went opening day, and it was one of those things where it was like one other person in the theater, and you're like, oh, this film is not going to carry like the water for that's just, and it was a box office failure. No one went and saw this film. But I will say I have a really soft spot for the film just because there are certain films where the first 25 minutes are so full of fun and joy. And you're like, I think this might be the greatest film ever. It's so dumb. It's kind of got a big heart. It's not based in reality. And then the films rarely stay that way. Like they get nervous and then they change. And this film really falters because of it. But at first I was like, if it could be this silly, dumb look at this, tribute band Fixation with Mark Wahlberg going in totally earnestly, it could have ran the full 100 minutes, but it doesn't. You mentioned Ripper Owens. He replaced Rob Halford in Judas Priest. And he was in a Judas Priest cover band at the time.
Right.
And so some of the film has parallels. There's also some parallels for a documentary. Have you seen Driver 23?
No.
It's about a Minneapolis metal head who basically is building contraptions in the studios in his basement, like a really complicated hoist to get the amps out of the basement pulled up, to the driveway.
Wow.
But it breaks and everything just goes crazy. And he's really struggling with, a lot of issues, but he's like laser focused.
Wow.
And so some of the film is based on that too.
Mm-hmm.
Just the tunnel vision
Yeah.
Of stardom. And so now what's the difference between a tribute band and a cover band?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. And this comes up in the movie as well. A tribute band is a band that, in addition to playing the songs by the prime band, let's call them, they also mimic the look and stage presence and everything else, all the kind of ancillary things related to that band besides just the songs and the music. A cover band just plays the primary band's songs and isn't trying to pull off the AC/DC Experience or something like that. We would just go out and play the songs and play them well, I think, but not try to replicate. Like our lead guitarist didn't wear shorts, for example.
You didn't wear the hat?
No.
Those are hard songs to sing.
Yeah. That was a big challenge. There were two different iterations of the band, one pre 9/11 and one post 9/11. The initial singer we had, I think we found through just like a Village Voice ad or Craigslist or something like that. And she was a woman, and she came in and she was great. She was, she had sung before, not surprisingly. And so we played a bunch of shows with her and our original bass player. And with that incarnation, we actually did some of the Brian Johnson era as well. And then after 9/11 happened, needless to say, a lot of people got kind of rattled. We took some time off. She decided she didn't want to, still do the band anymore. We kind of quietly kicked out the bass player without really telling him, I think, and recruited.
Oh my God, that's classic.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, oh, we're breaking up the band. No, thanks for your time. And then 2 months later, we're playing again. And so we found another friend of ours who coincidentally, well, not really that coincidentally, because it's sort of how we knew each other, but is now WFMU DJ Matt Fiveash, who does the Weekly World Blues program on Wednesday evenings, East Coast time. He started playing bass. We found a new singer who was friendly with our guitarist and bass player. And with that configuration, we only did Bon Scott era songs, partly because I think everyone just liked them a little bit better, and partly because Paul, the second singer, just had the Brian Johnson songs are a little more challenging for certain vocal ranges.
I just really wish you had called the band Evan Funk Davies Experience doing Dave Evans, the first singer. So it's like you got Evan Davies,
right,
and we got Dave Evans.
I did used to imagine when I was a kid and had no idea at that point who Dave Evans was, that if I ever needed a stage name or an alias, Dave Evans would be a great choice for obvious reasons. But then later I came to learn, of course, there really was a somewhat prominent singer named Dave Evans.
So in the movie, Mark Wahlberg plays this character called Chris Cole, who's fanatical. He's very passionate about the band Steel Dragon, a mythical band, a fake band. So he has a tribute band called Blood Pollution.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really weird. The band that is in the film also has Timothy Olyphant.
Right.
Like from Deadwood, right? With a wig on or extensions. Yeah. And I saw this, and this was before Deadwood, and this is before The Wire. The acting in the film can be quite good. And Timothy Olyphant really playing somebody who's struggling to be like, I'm kind of over being in a tribute band. He does it really well. He's very charismatic. And that scene at the beginning, Mark Wahlberg's like, play it again. That's not the squeal. That's not the way it is. And he goes over to his cassette player, plays it. And he's like, do it again. No, like this.
Right.
All right, do it again. I'm like, okay, I love this movie because I feel like whether it's a tribute band, cover band or real band, there's always somebody who cares a bit more than everyone else.
Right.
There's always a taskmaster. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, they nailed that. Somebody who's like, what's your problem, man? You're 2 minutes late. But I love it because he lives at home in a daycare, of course, shot on a studio lot, obviously.
Yeah.
Kids running around. He can just wake up, put on his, Steel Dragon leather jacket with no shirt and just kind of walk around the kitchen, go out on his day. There's a nice scene where like headbangers, they're headbanging in a car and a bunch of construction workers drive up and there's a little bit of tension while they're singing the song to the construction workers and they get, they flash them the devil horns. And again, it's kind of a perfect popcorn movie. I mean, is there any point in this film that you do love? I mean, do you have a genuine love for this film?
I think I used to more than I do having recently rewatched it. I think kind of like what you were saying earlier, I love the spirit of it. I love the fact that it kind of takes this story of someone who is in this tribute band and gets plucked into the real quote unquote world of rock and roll and goes on tour with his idols and everything that. I mean, that's a great story. And, who among us as musicians hasn't, at least for a moment, idly dreamed of like, oh, what if I ended up getting to play with, my favorite band or, something like that. And
like
so
Guided
I
by Voices, when I was in a tribute band called Giant Bug Village. I played 2 shows in a Guided by Voices cover band. And then like a year later, I'm like, I'm in Guided by Voices.
Uh-huh.
And it was the same thing. I was playing bass in the audience. And, at a Guided by Voices show, they saw me. They heard me from the audience. They pulled me up. The bass player left. And I just plugged in and I joined the band, just like in this movie.
What were you doing with a bass at a Guided by Voices show?
Don't ruin the illusion.
But I mean, that kind of a story though really does go across because that's also like the basis of like any schoolboy athlete's dream as well of like playing the big game and like making the catch in the outfield as some scout in the stands points and says, "Sign that kid up." And it's kind of the same. It's very much the same. The same emotion and the same feeling. And I was never like an athlete in high school, but I can, as someone who played drums when I was younger and never really aspired to be in like a big arena band, but still, you can appreciate how much that means to Mark Wahlberg's character to get in this position. I think the reason I can't unequivocally say I love the movie is just because there's so much cringy stuff that starts happening, especially as it gets after, kind of past that first 20 or 30 minutes. Like
absolutely. Saying. But I want to point out, there's a couple great scenes before it gets cringy. The first one is when they go to see Steel Dragon at the arena and they're putting like flyers on all the, cars, like Decline 2 or whatever. And they come out and they have basically a fight with another dueling tribute band. And they're just like, those lapels aren't right. He never had yellow in his lapels.
Right.
And I just thought it was such a great scene. They're just basically being like, oh, you can't do this. Did you have a competing AC/DC band that you're like, they keep snaking our shows? I can't believe it.
The short answer is no, because there wasn't really anyone else. We were playing like because the people in our band were in other bands. We were playing like more like kind of the regular rock, like kind of, underground rock club circuit. We weren't going after like the big, suburban bar shows where you get a lot of your cover bands performing. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't really anyone else in the same circle with us, but, we also weren't, we weren't going after their gigs either. We weren't trying to get on like, the bigger like tribute band shows that might've been happening. Again, I feel like those were happening more outside of New York City than they would have been happening in the city, but we would be playing at the same, 50 or 100 capacity bars that like some of the other bands that people in my band were in.
You never played at an oil field that your dad works at, like in this movie. That's what happens next is basically their parents, Mark's parents or Chris's parents, sorry.
Yes. Very supportive.
Basically are like, they have scaffolding, a whole, pyrotechnics, and like, I'm like, looks really dangerous wherever they're performing. I'm like, things are going to catch on fire and you could knock something over that would explode. And again, one of the things that I think is so funny that happens a lot in movies is when just all the sound drops away and you can hear someone have a conversation.
Yeah.
So Mark Wahlberg and Timothy Olyphant get in a fight on stage about like he's not playing it right. And like the sound just goes to like this minuscule level and they're like, hey dude, don't do it that way. Come on, man, we're having fun. And it's like this happens over and over again in the film where they just seem to be able to like have conversations on stage at like a normal talking level. And it's just something I wanted to point out that like I kind of love about this film is like, oh, they don't know like how this works on stage. No one here, which is weird because the heavy metal band Steel Dragon has like Zakk Wylde in it, and Jason Bonham, but I doubt they were on set being like, well, let me tell you how it is, you know.
I mean, you can't even have a conversation in an audience and when you're at a rock show, let alone on stage.
No, I'd love to see the Butthole Surfer biopic where Gibby and Paul are like, hey, man, it's going really good tonight. It's like, okay, yeah, man, you know, your guitar's a little loud. Oh, man, well, you know, this is how they like it. Mark and Timothy Olyphant get in a scrap on stage. Have you ever seen a band fight on stage?
I have. Man. Of course, now that you asked me that question, I'm blanking on the name, but there was a band, I think they were from Detroit. This was like probably early 2000s. It's the only time I can think of where I've really seen this happen. But they were doing a show at Brownies, and they had just recorded a session at FMU earlier that day, not for my show. I wasn't doing a show there yet. But they were doing the show at Brownies, which was a club that used to be in the East Village in New York City. And things just fell apart. And I think they kind of finished the set, but I feel like that was their last show.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, definitely a thing that happens. And I have not seen it a whole lot, but yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a rite of passage to see something ugly once in a while.
Yeah.
This is leading up to another performance by the Revolutions Per Movie Players. You know, we did this once with Jay Gonzalez for the Rockpile movie Born Losers, where we just have to act out a scene from what we're doing. So to set the stage, Chris and Rob are arguing. They get in the fight at the big oil field performance. And Rob decides to show up at practice. There's a new singer there from the competing Steel Dragon tribute band.
Right.
So Chris storms down, and the scene begins.
You made your point. Get him out, now.
Hey, Chris, you see these? It's a new PA he brought with him, too. And there's a new mixing board. He got that, too.
Have you heard the voice he brought with him?
Look, I don't care if Bradley can hit all the notes Bobby Beers can hit. Bobby's leaving the band anyway.
You don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Nina and Samantha hooked up with the band in Fort Wayne. They say Bobby is leaving.
That's bullshit, man. You don't know better.
Whatever. It doesn't matter. We're only doing Steel Dragon covers to get people through the door so they can hear our originals. We're tired of being a cover band.
We are not a cover band. We're a tribute band.
No, dude. We are a cover band. The problem is we've been covering the tunes and you think you're in goddamn Steel Dragon. I love you, man, but you're mental. You really are. You need to get a grip on reality. You don't know where Bobby Beers ends and you begin.
I'm mental because I don't want to be in a cheesy bar band that butchers the music people come to hear just to trap them into listening to your crappy originals.
Crappy originals? I think Hole and a Half kicks ass and I'm proud as shit to have written it.
I guess that's why we've gotten so many requests for it.
Don't make me feel like shit just because you're too scared to write your own songs.
Yeah, that's it. I'm too scared. Yeah, look, come on, guys. We started this band because we love playing Dragon tunes. We couldn't imagine playing anything else. What happened?
Enter bass player. Dude, I thought it'd be a goof.
A goof?
Chris, seriously, wouldn't you rather fail as yourself than to succeed as some sort of Bobby Beers clone?
Yeah, Rob, maybe you can write me a song about why in the hell I would ever want to do that.
All right, you're gone. Just go.
Fine. This is my mic stand. I'm taking it. These are my cables. You know, I don't even think I'm coming back.
Good.
Look, I'm serious. If I leave, I'm not coming back. Last time.
Chris starts grabbing the mics and the cords. He leaves. It reminds me of The Jerk. He's basically grabbing the mic cords and he's like, this is mine. And I'm going to go over here and this is mine. And this is mine. But we haven't mentioned that Jennifer Aniston plays their manager and his girlfriend. And they are like, you can still be our manager. And she's like, the only thing that has talent just left this room.
Yes.
She's really miscast in this film.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, there are people in this film, like Timothy Spall, who you believe he's this British roadie with this bad mullet. And he's playing so against type, but he's believable. And it just feels like Jennifer just is like, I'm kind of uncomfortable with some of this. Like, I don't really want to do the rock thing. It's just, it's met so halfway. It's really kind of a shame.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That was definitely a little bit of a weak point in the overall film.
Has there ever been a band that you loved, but then they did a personnel change and you're like, I'm done?
Nothing comes to mind right offhand, honestly.
Not like Cheap Trick when Tom Peterson left. You're like, oh. That was for me. And also Kiss. I was kind of like,
right.
Ace is gone.
Right. I mean, I guess it's hard. I mean, it's if the core of the band stays, then sometimes it can still be good. I mean, I haven't. Cheap Trick now obviously is kind of a shadow of themselves, and I haven't seen them. I saw them when I was at NYU, but I have not seen them at all recently, so I can't comment on how much of a fun show it is or not with the current lineup that they have.
I saw it. It was really fun. But one of my favorite musicians of all time is Bunny Carlos.
Oh yeah, I know. Same.
And Bunny Carlos was not playing this show.
Right.
But it was still, they're still great.
Yeah.
But for me, that was a chemistry band.
Mm-hmm.
And I never got to see him with Bunny Carlos. One of my big regrets.
Yeah. I actually did see them with Bunny Carlos at the Palladium in New York City, which is like, 3,000 person space. It was pretty amazing. But I think, I know you had Craig Finn on to talk about the Ramones, the Rock and Roll High School, and you had a conversation about, seeing the Ramones with their, kind of rotating drummer lineup in their later years. And, I forget if it was you or Craig who made a good point that when you have the opportunity to see a band like that, you should still do it because, you still have that nucleus at that point of the band. And, again, just like listening to that, it's like it kind of hit me all over again. Like, all those guys are gone now. It's such a weird, like that's the last thing you would expect to happen with that band, I feel like.
No, it's pretty much like go, because you just never know. And
right.
I mean, I've walked out of a few things that I've, been disappointed in, but the majority of the time, I'm really glad I went, you know. Like I went and saw Negativland recently after like a 30-year absence, right?
Mm-hmm. And
it was incredible.
Wow.
It was so moving and powerful. And there was part of me that was like, yeah, I'm kind of tired tonight, like I've seen them before, back when they were, like on SST, it's cool, But yeah, I think more than ever, it's like you just don't know if this will be your last chance,
Right.
So
right.
And some things like I never got to see Gang of Four. They didn't come to Portland all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, even if you're like, well, it's missing, essential elements of this chemistry thing, sometimes it's enough to just make it be like, oh, these songs mean a lot to me and this killer.
Yeah, I remember actually I don't even know how I knew about this stuff, I guess through New York Rocker or some, maybe the English music magazines. But I remember being concerned this was when I was at NYU, so this was probably like 80 or 81, when I heard that Ultravox had replaced their frontman, because I had loved Ultravox with John Fox, and I found out that Major was going to be the frontman for Ultravox. And at the time, all I knew about him is that he had been in Thin Lizzy for some amount of time.
Yes.
Like I wasn't aware of the Rich Kids. I wasn't aware of Slick or, whatever else he had done.
Is that
wild? I was like, how is this going to work? Like someone from Thin Lizzy singing for Ultravox. And I saw Ultravox at Hurrah, which again was this fairly small club.
Right.
And they started performing and I was trying to figure out like which one was Major, and they started with an instrumental and then he walked out. And this was probably this was actually before the Vienna album came out, because the song they opened with is on that album, but I didn't recognize it yet. And, of course, I still ended up really liking them, and I liked their next at least couple of albums they did with Midjor, and then they kind of went a little bit more in a poppy direction for my taste. But, he turned out to be fine.
So to me, this is the end of the good part of the film, kind of. Like,
I think so.
Yeah, it's kind of playful up to this point. The arguments are funny, but they also feel like they know that they're kind of having fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just morality tale after morality tale. And it gets pretty bloated pretty quick. He does get a phone call in the middle of the day from Steel Dragon saying, "We've heard your voice. We're watching the tapes now. Through your friends who are our groupies, who are just hanging out with us now."
Yeah, the actual guitar player from the band places the call.
Yeah, exactly. and of course, the great scene where it's like, "How do I know it's you?"
Right.
"Oh, yeah, well, I called my ex-wife this and my current wife this." And just like, he's like, "Oh, it's you." Like what Steel Dragon fan probably didn't know that tidbit. I was like, man, that's a pretty weak drop of knowledge,
Well, I want to take a minute, because you mentioned earlier the various director credits, or the various film credits that the director of this movie has. The writer of this movie did not write any other movies before or after, which I think says a lot.
Do you know about him as an actor?
I know he had an acting career. I don't really know.
Yeah, he played. So his name's John Stockwell, and he was best known for playing Dennis in Christine.
Okay.
So he played like the friend of the kid who's getting obsessed with the car.
Okay.
And so it's just so weird. It's like, I'm going to try my hand at this. And originally, this was going to be more of a biopic,
right,
with Judas Priest's involvement and Ripper Owens' involvement. Brad Pitt was signed on to star in it. George Clooney was going to be attached to produce it, and it was called Metal God. And it's so weird. There was like a bidding war for the story, and then the band just disavowed it in the end. They're just like, we have they didn't consult us on anything.
Yeah.
And also at this point, Judas Priest was very fractured. You had, I think it's like KK's Priest over here with like Ripper singing with like the guitarist, and Judas Priest, they're doing their own thing,
Yeah.
It still blows me away. Like the other night, it's like Jeff Lynne's ELO. Yeah. It's like on a giant stage with a big UFO, and you're like, wow, they still have to like legally say Jeff Lynne's ELO in case I'm getting confused. That this big arena is the one that's not the Bev, one. It's just it's wild.
I did see Jeff Lynne's ELO, not on this current tour. They haven't been. They're heading east as we record this, but I saw them at Madison Square Garden a couple of years ago. It was actually a really good show.
Yeah,
I didn't feel like I needed to go out and see them again, but as an ELO fan, when I was younger, it was definitely satisfying, and I'm glad I saw, tying up like what we were talking about before. I'm glad I saw Jeff Lynne on stage playing those songs.
Yeah. No, I just wish there was more like Bob Burt's Pussy Galore. Like it's just like, whoa, okay, that's a big swing. Like people just kind of going for it that you don't expect. And they're like,
right.
I was a big part of it. Yes, you were. Yeah, but like I didn't know. Like it's just like actually a Pussy Galore tribute band would be pretty amazing.
That would be.
Man. I can dream, right? Is there a band that you would ever love to see as a tribute band? Like something that you, in your wildest dreams, never got to see or would be kind of misplaced as a tribute band? That might be so wrong it's right.
I don't know. I mean, the one band that I always think of that I didn't get a chance to see that's kind of a big regret is Original Television, because I got to New York City like right after they had broken up. And I never saw Tom Verlaine. I did see Richard Lloyd, in his band that he started soon after Television broke up, and then more recently with his current or current-ish band. But that's that's not an answer to the question, because I feel like that's a case where you really couldn't do it justice with a cover band. I mean, even if, I don't know, maybe I'm making this up. I feel like even if all four members of a Television cover band could play everything perfectly, it still wouldn't really be the same as seeing actual Television back in the day or even more recently.
I was really shocked I saw them recently. I was really nervous to see it because I was like, oh, it seems like maybe they're just over it. It was really incredible. It was like really emotional, and they played like they still cared. But I did see one of the coolest stage moves I've ever seen. So Tom Verlaine's playing guitar, soloing, doing a long instrumental passage, and he starts walking over towards Fred playing bass, and he literally boxed him out off the stage, walked him off the stage with just physical presence. Like,
wow.
Like, I'm not saying anything to you, but you need to back away, even though I'm in your space. And I'd never seen that happen before.
Wow.
And it was like, I got to see a dick move
right
in real time from television and a late period thing. And it was done through music and just kind of walking slowly. It was such a slow move, but I thought it was so killer. I was like, that's a move I wish I could do. It's too bad I like my band members. But
well, you've got enough people on stage with you when you're playing, and eyelids at least. You could take one of them out and no one would really notice. Like,
I'll do it to Peter Buck. Just walk him off.
Yeah.
Like, just be like, he'll be like, what's going on? He'd probably be fine with it. He'd probably know what I'm talking about. He'd be like, oh, you're doing the Tom Verlaine to me. Cool. I'll just go with it. I saw that. I saw that in 1977. Sure. The rest of the film is basically, Chris joining, Steel Dragon, has to do an audition, and, immediately he's in, right? And it's like, they keep telling him, like, practice your accent, practice your British accent. And his accent never sticks. It's like one song, he'll be like, hello, everybody, how's it going? And then the next banter point, he's like, I just want to tell you, dreams can come true. I was just a kid. And I'm like, wait.
Yeah. Well, and especially, and that comes right after one of the many, scenes that makes you think the movie was written by a 12-year-old.
Yes.
When they're having the press conference and someone is asking, Chris, the character Chris, how he, how why his accent is so good. And he responds in a way that I would rather not say, even though we're not on the radio, because I'm prudish like that. But even, he has this vulgar response, and then he keeps on repeating it over and over again. And then it carries over into the bedroom with Jennifer Aniston after the news conference. But he's like clearly working on his English accent using this phrase. And then I really think it's like literally the next scene, they're playing a show, and that song you're talking about, he starts introducing that song in a plainly American accent with no attempt to be English at all.
It happens twice in this film.
Yeah, right.
Twice, like at the climax of the film and earlier, and you're like, no one there was like watching this and being like, oh shit, right, go back. Like an actor, a fellow actor, I don't know, maybe it has to do with, like you just don't tell someone. Like Mark Wahlberg was really a star still back then. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we went into it being like, oh, maybe this is going to be like a Boogie Nights kind of thing, like, it's just going to be, you're going to get some sort of energy from him. And he is very charismatic in the film. I think he does a pretty good job considering it's a really generic role. I think he kind of does a better job than a lot of people because he's just kind of he seems like a lunkhead anyway. So it's like, it's kind of like play to type, cast to type. But yeah, it's just full of those moments. Like he finally gets to do the big show and he trips and he falls in slow motion. And then it's like, don't help him up. He's got to do this on his own. Like, it's like a football movie. It's like, he may have broken his neck, but let's see if he can go and still play the final, I don't know sports, throw of the game. How's that? I just, that is the worst thing I've ever done. First throw of the game. But, it's just the party scene, where everyone like, it's like a dance orgy basically that leads to the bedroom. It's very transphobic film.
And homophobic.
Yes, definitely. Made at a different time where people are like, hey, we're going to lean into the Rob Halford situation a bit, but we're just going to kind of make fun of it.
Yeah, it's not done in a way that makes you feel like they're on the side of the gay person coming out. It's like really,
Right.
I just feel like all the snide remarks and name calling and jokes are really, cutting in at the expense of, the exiting frontman of the band, and not in a way that's meant to be at all sympathetic to what he's going through. And that's one of the things that makes it kind of hard to, it makes it hard to like the movie as a whole at this point.
Absolutely.
For me, because there's just so much of that. And again, it's like 12-year-old mentality that's, that no one kind of put a check on and said, hey, like maybe dial this part back a little bit because it's not central to the story.
Oh, well, you talk about 12-year-old fantasies. There's a long sequence about them getting the Batmobile and racing against each other. I'm like, with the Batman music, and they're wearing masks, and I'm like, this film sucks. Like at that point, you know what I mean? Like you just go through too much at a certain point. Again, the film has a lot of fun at the beginning. It's kind of a comedy, I feel like. It's like poking fun at what it must be to be in a tribute band and having these different characters. And heavy metal is very easy to, parody or make fun of, because the fans are so loyal and the people in it work really hard. So it's easy to amplify that and, make fun of it. Like the Tone of Decline 2 is very different than the Tone of Decline 1. And a lot of that is that even though, her making the film, she has a lot of love for all the people in the scene. The way it's edited and the way it's it shows a lot of them making themselves fools.
Right.
It's not like they showed the parts where maybe they were kind of intelligent. Some of the bands, like, all right, let's see Odin. Maybe they had some quotes that were usable that, but probably not. I don't know. But yeah, the film is a mess.
I mean, I kind of feel like up until I'm able to stick with it kind of up until they get to, the guitar player's mansion, I guess. And I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, I guess there are rock stars at a certain level that have houses like that with little recording studios and everything built in, but that's still, I mean, you have to be like if you're at that level, you're not making the call yourself to the guy in the tribute band to see if he can come out and audition for your band. You're a person to do that.
Well, and I assume that Gene Simmons, if you go to visit his house, has like memorabilia of the band leading into wherever you're going to meet him. Like in this film, there's like, oh, there's the outfit he wore and there's the guitar. For me, that is like, if I did that in real time, like go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I'm like, I glaze over looking at outfits and guitars. I'm just like, I'm like, it does not interest me at all. I'm like, cool, but now I know how tiny Mick Jagger is. I don't care. It's just weird. It's like, I don't need it. It's like, I want to see the footage. I want to hear the music. That's where the real, magic comes out of it, not just the weird artifact, that Jerry Garcia touched this,
Right. Right. And I do like the audition scene itself, but I really feel like where it starts to, it initially starts to take a turn when they first land, when at the airport and they meet up with the what's the main Steel Dragon's manager, played by future Succession secondary player Dagmara Dominchik, or however you say her last name. And so that, and there's, that's when you kind of get a lot of the innuendo starting, which is fine. I'm not against, innuendo between people, but it just, again, the tone of it just struck me as so, like little boyish.
Yes.
And then toward the end of the audition, when, the original singer shows up and he has, first of all, why is he wearing his wig? Why are any of them wearing their wigs in the house when they're just among themselves and not out performing on stage? That's a whole, that's another, fine, it's a movie, whatever. But then, there's that line toward the end of the audition scene where the singer, I think, is talking about Elvis, and one of the guys in the band says, well, Elvis was the king, and then the implication being, which the singer then says out loud, oh, and I'm just the queen, or something like that. And that's kind of where it really hits a sour note for me. And you start to think, oh, this might not be so much fun the rest of the way. And it kind of isn't overall.
No, and it just shows kind of where big films were at still. Like,
Yeah.
this is a big budget film. I mean, it's
Right.
not a cheap film. And they're like, we're okay with this. You know,
Yeah.
this, like, people think this is funny, or, you know, it just fits in with the story. Yeah, it's very ham-fisted.
Yeah.
And again, that's why the last 2/3 are a bummer, because when it tries to be funny, it's not. When it tries to be dramatic, it sucks.
Yeah.
And you just don't care. You're like, I know you're supposed to kind of at some point be like, oh, the band are assholes and he's got to get out of it.
Right.
But
right.
like, you're like, I don't care about Jennifer Aniston. I don't care about Mark Wahlberg. I don't care about Timothy Spall. You're just kind of waiting out the clock. And I remember when we saw it in the theater, we were so conflicted, because we were like, they blew it. Like, they had something that could have been like a film, like, I don't know, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, right? It's got a spirit to it, right?
Right, exactly.
This film has a bit of that kind of dumb spirit in it for the first third, that I think if they had been smart, they would have, you know, it would have done a good service to this film. And I think people would be like, oh, that's kind of a guilty, not even a guilty pleasure. They'd be like, I kind of like that film. You know, on certain nights, I put on Rockstar, because it's just, you know, I know what I'm going to get. It's like Step Brothers, Rockstar, you know, like.
Yeah. And it's still, I mean, you know, and you know, when you asked me if I was interested in coming on the podcast, which I appreciate, by the way, and to pick out a movie, I was running through a few choices in my head, and I didn't want to pick something super obvious or something that I feel like someone else would have already picked. Like The Girl Can't Help It would have been another one of my top choices. And, you know, I finally settled on Rockstar because, well, A, little did I know, but A, I thought it would be like a fairly obscure selection that you wouldn't be as familiar with.
Hey,
jokes on me.
I used to get into every single movie theater for free, you know?
Right.
So it was like, all I did was go to movies. You know, and go to shows. That was it.
Right. But it does kind of, you know, on a very obviously different level, it does sort of resonate me a little bit, since I was in that AC/DC cover band. And it just, you know, that aspect of the story is just kind of funny to me. This, you know, cover band guy makes it big. And, you know, I guess you could probably do one about the Journey singer also, now that I think about it. The guy who, and I actually saw Journey with that guy maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and he was incredible.
That documentary about him is fantastic.
Oh, I need to look for that.
Yeah, and it's kind of great. His first show, I mean, he's got the voice, right? He can do it.
Yeah.
But the first show, he was so excited. He did not pace himself. Then it's one of those stages that's got ramps, and
oh my God,
he was just running like a maniac, and he just burned himself out after 3 or 4 songs. He kind of lost it. And the band had to be like, hey, like, less of the maniac on stage, and like, slow it down a bit, you know, like, pace yourself. I highly recommend that, even if you're not a Journey fan.
I'll look for it.
It's great. You know, and
that's cool.
Again, this film, just like it happened with me with Guided by Voices, where I was playing bass in the crowd, just standing there with the bass, playing along with the band on stage. Another guy in the audience that he can hear in the arena singing with the band, but this guy's he's singing it better and even louder than I am.
Right.
You know,
with no microphone.
Which was what happened earlier to, you know, Chris, which is, you know, and of course, you know, they pluck him on stage, and it's like, that's cool. Like, we're all cool with this. And then I'm just going to leave the band now. You can do this. And the band seems cool with it. Like, they don't know where he's gone.
Right.
He's just gone. And then it's like, he runs back on stage, this new kid. And it's like, this guy, Thor, the god of thunder, is now their lead singer. And he's just going to be the singer. I mean, that would be really horrifying if I turned and all of a sudden I was like, wait, our singer's gone. And now there's someone from the audience, and we still have an hour to go. What's your name? Do you know these songs? Like, do we have to pay you? What's going on? It is such a fantasy. Oh my God.
Yeah. I think the other reason it appeals to me is that I do have a fondness for the hair metal era and for a lot of those bands. So just kind of from a soundtrack perspective, I enjoyed it.
I agree.
And I do from time to time, not yearly, because I don't think anyone could take that, including me, but every few years or so, I do like a hair metal special on my show, and pull out a lot of these records. And I was actually delighted to notice, which I hadn't noticed before, that one of the songs in this film was co-written by Steve Plunkett of Autograph, who were one of my favorite bands of that era. The curly red-haired guy.
Uh-huh.
I think it was the closing credits song, was co-written by Steve Plunkett. So that, things like that, still endear the movie to me on a certain level, even though there's so much in it that is like why did you write this, and why are these people actually saying it?
Well, I find that so many films I revisit, I'm just like, oh, this is not aged well. It just happens. But on the musical side, like, I kind of like that song "Stand Up" that Sammy Hagar wrote for this. It's a good metal song. Like,
it is.
It's like it's go 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 go.
Yeah.
Stand up and shout.
Yeah.
It's killer. Stand up. I mean, I'm not even that much of a metal fan, but I think it's a hooky killer song.
Oh, it totally is. Yeah, I mean, that could have been right up there with anything from, Dokken or any of those other bands.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, this film has also one of the funniest endings because Chris, basically, they cut to him sitting on a bench, and he's in Seattle, I believe, reforming a band with his friend Rob, who was in the metal band. They both cut their hair, and he says, one day, it wasn't for me anymore. Wearing the clothes, singing the song. And I'm like, dude, you look like Eddie Vedder now. Like, it is like he became that kind of musician.
Right.
It's so weird. Like, okay, so you were a metal guy wanting to be Bobby Beers. Now you're really yourself. But, I mean, it's so weird. It's like, oh, this is uncomfortable. Like, you basically watched Singles and were like, I could be one of these people.
But in a way, the time, I mean, not that it works with the actual timeline of the film, but how many of these hair metal bands, like, you go read any biography of any of these bands, and they all, like, 3/4 of the way through, you get to the point where, and then grunge happened in 1990 and everything, we lost everything. And so it's kind of funny in a way that it's following that same formula, 10 or 12 years later after it happened in real life. Yes. But yeah, that is kind of a funny denouement to the film.
Well, it's so funny because, I was on Sub Pop in 1991, right? And I wasn't paying attention to what was happening to other people, like, that were in metal or hard rock or whatever. It was so funny because it was just like, oh, these bands I like, or my friends are, getting signed. It was, oh, this is surprising. Because it kind of came out of nowhere. It really did, as you remember. Yeah. It was like, I did not see this coming at all. But it is funny to think about, these bands who were destroyed by this thing that only lasted a couple years in the mainstream. And then it was like Backstreet Boys, Right. It was like, it's so weird, the timeline, like, oh, yeah, that was after this,
right?
Like manufactured bands, But yeah, it's So it'd been kind of fun if they'd gone another 5 years, and then they were like, we joined up with Jason, Kyle, and Kevin, and we became this band called Outside In, and it's just like them and like a boy band doing songs, and then like 4 years from that go on, they're like, we just stripped it down. It was just a guitar and a drummer.
Right.
Just doing a White Stripes thing. And then 4 years from that, it's just like, keep going
like
down.
the indie sleaze version.
Exactly. And then at the end, they just become like a King Gizzard kind of band, they just, like, we finally found it. After 42 years of changing genres, we became King Gizzard. And now we just do whatever we want, man. One could dream.
Yeah, it's true.
And again, another great closing scene where, like, Mark Wahlberg is playing with his new band in a coffee house, and they're playing this kind of, well, it was written by someone in the Verve Pipe who's playing with them in this band.
Who's also the guy who plays Rob.
What?
The actor. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not just written. Yeah, that's the actor. I have it in my notes somewhere, but yeah,
Okay.
that's Brian Vander Ark from the Verve Pipe.
I don't know the Verve Pipe.
I don't either.
Yeah. So
I stopped at the Verve.
Yeah, exactly.
That's as far as I got with the Verve-related bands.
But it's great. He sees Jennifer Aniston walk in, and he's like, "Hey, she's here. I gotta go." And they're like, "Cool, man." And he walks off stage while they're still playing.
In the middle of the song.
And then the sound dips, of course, so they can have a conversation.
Course.
But the band's still playing. Like, it was so nice of them to turn down their amps and, everything at the same time so that he could have a conversation about, like, hey, I missed you. Yeah. It is, in the end, it's a shitty film. But I just love that first part.
Yeah, no, that does a lot of work for the film overall.
Yeah, it's so fun. Oh God, it's such a disappointment. I'm sorry. I don't know. It's
true.
I come in hot, and then but it is hard because watching it again, I've seen it many times. It is not by the time you're done, it is a drag, and watching it this time, and then watching the commentary and doing all research, it was like. Yeah, it was like, I know what's coming, right? So I'm like, all right, here's the scene where they go on the bus and everyone else, all the girlfriends have to sit in the car. And we do that, it's just like, you're like, okay, this isn't fun, right?
Right.
So, I don't know. This is a conflicting one. How dare you?
How hard would it have been for them to shoot that final scene, like out on the street in front of the club? Like, hey, let's go outside so we can talk. Okay. And then Chav, like, you don't have to say in the club to shoot that scene.
No, they do. It's sticking with the accent breaking and...
Oh, my God.
Yeah, Jennifer Aniston didn't want to be that close to an amplifier, obviously, in this film. She's got a fear of amplified music or something because she's like, I just can't deliver this. Yeah, a very, very conflicted film. But if you're looking for 25 minutes of tight comedy joy... with a heavy metal bass, I say start it, see where it goes, and you'll know when to stop it. You'll know when enough's enough. You might make it to the end. You might be like, I saw 8 minutes. That's enough.
Yeah, if you get to a point where you're thinking to yourself, gee, this has been pretty good so far. This is kind of a low point, but maybe it'll turn around. Just stop it right there because it's not going to turn around.
That's a really good way to put it. That is such a good way to put it. Evan, it's been so good to see you. Longtime fan. Was one of my highlights in Eyelids was getting to play your show years ago. I appreciate it so much. It's just, and to be inside WFMU, like having the theater of the mind of that station and the legacy, and then going to it and being led in, and you're like, oh my God, it's just been, I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Oh, thanks. It's been my pleasure. And hopefully you'll have the opportunity to come out to WFMU again sometime in the future.
Yeah, with my Eyelids cover band.
Yes.
Lidzo.
Lit Eyes.
Lit Eyes.
No, I think it has to be based on like a song title.
Let's see.
Seagulls
into Submission is not awesome. We're done with titles. Yeah. Yeah, we don't have any good. It was hard enough to come with Eyelids. I don't need
Right.
But at the end of every episode, ask the same question, but I tailor it depending on what we're talking about. So on a scale from 1 to 200, how many dueling metal tribute bands fighting it out in a parking lot do you give this film?
Oh, man.
I mean, just imagine the scope.
Yeah.
Like,
that's a lot of...
Like, you see a few or you see up to 200?
I think I'm going to go with... I mean, this would still be a lot of tribute bands. I was not expecting this high of a scale. I would go with 123.
Oh, that's amazing. That's what I have written here. That's nuts.
But I agree.
So
much in sync.
Yeah, because I figure I was kind of doing the math, And I was like, yeah, about, halfway through, but then a little less. But I need to give it more because it's so enjoyable at the beginning. It's doubled.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's perfect. Thank you for bringing this film to everyone's attention. Again, this has rarely happened, but we say view with caution.
Yes.
Evan, thank you again for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to join the list of Revolutions Per Movie interviewees.
Stand up and shout! Thank you for listening to Revolutions Per Movie. We release new episodes every Thursday on your favorite podcast app and additional bonus episodes every Sunday on our Patreon. The show is a completely independent affair, so the best way to support the show is through our Patreon at patreon.com/revolutionspermovie, where you can get weekly bonus episodes and shows, exclusive limited edition flexi discs and records and CDs featuring guests that have appeared on the show, and other exclusive goods sent to you just for joining. You can follow us on social media at Revolutions Per Movie and also find out more information about our various guests in the episode show notes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Bye!